Regional you NPP, no. And why yes, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah region shoot down on a Western starting and I said, or starting in December 7 way a warm up. And definitely, action we now will reflect in December 7. That is why Ribiano, we are very consistent and straightforward. Say Ghana for every, and it does only give you a one or NPP. No, you know. Na enya de se Ghana for the Twabama NPP. It's answer Ghana for you to come here with the Twaba. It is do for my Kurana or Moko Daswa no Pay Yanianajo. A come to your mo group NPP party. Wow. Now what about unemployed graduates? Ghana for 1 year to my year. Now Omutisi no more brain or musu.
Yeah, don't be a say, Sabrina Benny now, no do a video no eto we are for Ken TV so ya mama kwa strong ko and so at the badge media baby diesel. Me a major drama meeting and in na nekia. Na ye boshi e kopie mo ye Western region ya. Hey, asem kesiesi wo hono mo. Ene NP wo hono mo honorable Kobi Ochedako Mensa. Ene ne ka one ye Dr. Mamdu Maumia no mfoni bopopo ho na ne ka ye campaign de wo kroni musa nyame on pade ka ne kosai wo dwom ne dwom man fo ne se ye nhuru wudi adom so woo wonye hwe nyame na tua wo ka ye ne age se wo ka no asai na Mr. Frank Adan na eja homa ne so ne betwetwe nkomo e dia fa ho ansa na no ye nkwane ye kokotwe video ne se de ye koye ye ba ye be kwa homa ne so video no na yakwa share ede abano de ekoso wo manga na mu ha no enu no na ye mo hwi ni akwa homa ne so Mr. Frank Adan ne ejina so ye ne no kwetwe nkomo. Hello Mr. Frank.
Nana kuya.
Me mo akwa ba.
Mejo so oba ho fe.
Se bibia boko de.
Oh, nyankopon dom mo mpai bo. Ne se de atamfo bre na atamfo ani egu ase abre ni abre nyina no ho ye dodo.
Oh, ye dodo ampa Mr. Frank. Na video ye kokko hwe yi wo hu ne se enei Ghana edwomfo ma omo pre eye omodaache papa de amomo mana.
Nana kuya e perefo bu bebi se sabi kwasia na ni ti ana agro no ayeden. Agu. Na sabi kwasia yintie na yisumpri. Na your former president Dr. Kwame Nkrumah so MEP could be. Also, whenever the grievances of the people is believed or denied, there will be violence here and there. Not that the people will it, but the accumulated grievances erupt like a volcanic fury. Any over the air coastal war, the political system, and then we are a dear dance. If we said the enough first, you see, it's a kind of war, and in Naho about to know, and me a strong home. Now, when you say Western regions, regional you NPP, you know, and why yes, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah regional now.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so we don't know whether say shoot down on a Western starting and I say about starting in December 7 way a warm up and definitely action we now will reflect in December 7. That is why Ribiano we are very consistent and straightforward say Ghana for every and it does only GDI one MPP no na you know. Na enya de se Ghana for beto abama NPP esan se Ghana for ye de komi abusu ne to aba enti if domfo ma akura na omo kodwa so na pa awiane anajo e kom di omo e mo mo guru NPP party wa na what about unemployed graduates Ghana for mo ne aduma ye na omo tifi na omo bre na omo su omo na mekwa koto omo abama NPP ana we ya so tebe o kan okuro we kire NPP for na obi tenchan or no so a guru boy, WhatsApp administrator or a patron. No, you do attempt so we NDC. Now said you could do now what Cardiana, your NDC for price near what NDC for price.
Mr. Frank, now Yabakaya, a year, Dr. Mamudu Bawumia, dear, any manifesto, no, a betua bonteno. Answer no crowd what they banoke can't say what be a Juma a year 2.3 million. And don't am so my there be another boy church say what boy you can't tumpo na wucha what can come and then ya dom Ghana media France bebre aso mua and ye omu pense mu church na man for say doctor and some more canon say and ne a year currently Ghana a man for mu ye Juma ne doctor the watcher say Juma for no so afa woman a bobra na say emobra na video change pa epie wa Ghana has a na say ba ko video no mebusa will say ye Mr. Frank who will be a kafa video you wanna
and I hear media council the no work up video no one say Ghana media team we are a big boo ba na me day mount kwa say obema won to ma na what you
Mr. Frank ya da wasi bebre abusua for yan kon ye kon kohwe video no said ye ekoye ne emu chechre a omode ababetu dwaso.
So that's the vice president. 2.3 million jobs have been created by this administration. And in fact, if that figure is anything to go by, what the Ghana Statistical Service has been putting out should be different. 2.3 million jobs created should have at least a significant impact on the labor market survey that the Ghana Statistical Service conducted. That also paints another picture. So this 2.3 million jobs that the Vice President talks about has been fact-checked by my good friends at Fact Check Ghana, Rabiu Alasan and likes, who question what is the source of the data that the Vice President puts out. But in 2022, the first time the Vice President made this claim of 2.3 million jobs, there was an Excel spreadsheet that he presented. And the data in that Excel spreadsheet has been reproduced in a number of media portals. And this is where we got the information. So this is it. I want you to follow me closely. This is what he put out there in 2022. The 2.3 million jobs, at some point he said it was 2.1, excluding the NAPCO, and then also Planting for Food and Jobs. Down in 2017, according to the breakdown from Dr. Bamia's spreadsheet that he put out, 413,540 jobs were created in 2017. And the sectors that these jobs were created are the Ghana Police Service, Prison Service, Fire Service, Ghana Immigration Service. They employed 3,500 in the year 2017. In the same year, 2017, state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises, according to Dr. Mahmoud Bamia's spreadsheet, 171,079 jobs were created by these SOEs. And reference was made to the increase in SNIT data of contributors. And then the Trade and Industry and its ministry and its agencies, 31,171 jobs were created. And let me say that this is not according to the Ghana Statistical Service data. It is not coming from the SNIT data for that matter, and then also, for instance, the Controller Accountant General's Department data. And we do know not all public servants are paid through the Controller Accountant General. So yes, that's an outlier. But then again, this is what he gives us as a breakdown. And then if you look at 2018, based on the claim they make, 373,708 jobs were created in 2018. The security agencies employed 3,500. State-owned enterprises, 188,385. And in 2018, the Trade and Industry Ministry and its agencies did not create any jobs, according to this statement by Dr. Bawumia and then the spreadsheet he put out. But bear in mind, a number of these SOEs have been making losses for quite a while. And so then the question was, drill down this data for us so we know the specific state-owned enterprises that have made so much profit that they are able to employ so much. Because per what we do know, the SOEs are not doing too good, right? We didn't get that. Now, 2019, it says 615,169 jobs were created. And in 2019, the security agencies did not employ. That's according to that spreadsheet he put out sometime in 2022. But the state-owned enterprises employed 180,258. And then the Trade and Industry Ministry and its agencies employed 153,422. That's according to the Vice President. In 2020, during COVID, and take a look at this. During COVID, according to the breakdown by the Vice President's 2.3 million jobs, 3,554 people were employed in the security agencies and the state-owned enterprises in 2020 during COVID employed. They got new jobs for people. And the Trade and Industry Ministry and its agencies, 58,357. That was in 2020 during COVID. So then again, the question that you ask is, then how much impact or damage did COVID make or have on the economy if when we were suffering as a result of the impact of COVID-19, which has been the reference point for the economic quagmire that we find ourselves in now today? During COVID, government was still creating new jobs, according to the breakdown by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. So COVID really did not have so much of an impact. That's a question. But then again, if you look at 2021, and we're going to get into that shortly, and give you an idea of how much or how many jobs were created in 2021 per Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia's breakdown. And bear in mind that within that same period, in 2021, specifically in October 2021, the former finance minister, Ken Oforiatta, attended the UPSA graduation, and he did state quite clearly that the government payroll is full. In fact, no public sector employment, because the over 650,000 people who have been employed are on the government payroll. Government cannot continue to employ. This was in 2021. It was COVID. We were preparing to go to the IMF. The government was broke at the time. This is what the finance minister said at that UPSA graduation. Take a look.
We have gone through a period where most people look for jobs with government, etc. That payroll is full. I can tell you that, because we are spending some 60% of our revenue on remunerating some 650,000 people, and that's not sustainable.
That's the former finance minister. The government payroll is full. But then if you look at it, in that same year, we made some employment. In fact, we employed people into certain areas, according to the vice president. These 2.3 million. If the argument is that these were replacements of existing vacancies, and so it wasn't really new jobs created, then does that fit into the argument of jobs created, as in new jobs created? Because I recall we asked this question, and the answer we got was that these employments that were made during the period that the finance minister announced that the government payroll is full, these were not new jobs. These were people who had gone on retirement, some had died. And so was it really the case that were just vacancies that were being filled, existing vacancies? Can that be classified as new jobs created? It's a question that we can also get answers to. But if you recall, in 2022, when the former Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, was presenting the 2023 budget in November 2022, he did indicate that there was a freeze on government or public sector employment in the ensuing year 2023. I want you to take a look at this.
A hiring freeze for civil and public servants. No new government agency shall be established in 2023.
That's according to the Vice President, the Finance Minister. So, in all within this period, in fact, the Vice President's 2.3 million jobs he talks about is between 2017 and 2022. So then, between 2022 and 2024, how many jobs have been created? Because this 2.3 million jobs the Vice President talks about is within the first 5 years of this administration. They're able to create 2.3 million jobs. Then between 2022 and 2024 now, we want to know how many jobs have been created as well. You recall that the Labour and Employment Relations Minister, Ignatius Bafwewa, also made that claim that 5 million jobs had been created at some point. This was sometime last year. So the inconsistencies in the number of jobs created also raises a fundamental question. But bear in mind, all of this number of jobs created is not coming from the Ghana Statistical Service. And as we go on, I'll show you shortly what the Ghana Statistical Service has been saying about unemployment data. But this is where I bring in a data analyst who's been doing quite some work with me on this one to help us understand this breakdown. But let's take a listen to the Vice President again, okay? And then Alfred Tichi is going to be joining me. Take a look at what the Vice President said.
Many economists and analysts have rightly stated that Ghana has turned the corner. But we know that for many families, the cost of living is still very high. The hardship is real, and we commit to doing more to relieve the difficulties Ghanaians are facing. We are equally committed to creating more job opportunities that will significantly reduce youth unemployment among the national population that has increased over 5 million in the last 8 years alone. We have created so far 2.3 million jobs, the most of any government in the Fourth Republic. But youth unemployment remains a major concern, and that confronts us. And we are committed to doing even more.
So that's what the Vice President claims. And if you look at this, in September 2022, Ignatius Bafwewa, Employment and Labour Relations Minister, quoted as saying government had created 5.3 million jobs. This was in September 2022. Then the Vice President talks about 2.3 million jobs. So whose report should we believe? The Vice President or the Employment Relations Minister? Alfred Appiah is a data analyst. He's been crunching the numbers on this matter. Also a data scientist, also policy analyst joining us. Alfred, it's good to have you join us here on Ghana Tonight. First of all, take a look at what is on the screen there, Alfred, and what the Employment Relations Minister is talking about, and what the Vice President is also put out there. But you've heard that, for instance, the Vice Chair of the Manifesto Committee of the NPP, Kojo Ponkuma, has been consistent in defending this position by the Vice President. How does that strike you?
Oh, thanks, Alfred, for having me. And I think, it's interesting that the Vice Chair mentions the SNIT data, because actually one of the sources that I was going to use was SNIT data to show that the SNIT data does not match the data that they are talking about. Part of my issue is that we try to use different sources. So remember that this is government talking about its own source. Government or the politicians are providing their own job numbers. But we also have publicly available information. So through the Ghana Stats Service, through the Controller and Accountant General, through the Ghana Revenue Authority, through tax data. So what I've been trying to do is to show, could we really use those sources to be able to say that the government has created 2.3 million jobs. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to show here, that the point of deviation is that these numbers that the politicians are throwing around don't match up with the ones that we have from all the other public sources that we know. And
as you said, so the SNIT data, as you have it and as we're seeing, cannot support that claim of 2.3 million jobs created.
Yeah, because the SNIT data, and I'll show it. So the SNIT data that they're using is basically when somebody registers on SNIT, right? And then it's assumed that the person is a new job that has been created. But what is important is not just people registering on SNIT. What is important is to show that, if the supposed job that has been created is sustainable, is that people are continuing to contribute to SNIT. So SNIT has another data called active contributors, right? And so that should be, if you look at the change in that's where you will see how many people are actively contributing to SNIT. That will give you a better sense of the jobs rather than registration. Because remember, SNIT has also been on campaigns trying to get people to register for SNIT. So it could even be people that are already working that are signed up for SNIT. So if you go ahead and just use the SNIT numbers, you are thinking that you're creating jobs, but really you're also looking at people that already have jobs and just signing up to register for SNIT.
And so here's what I want us to do, Alfred. So since the Vice President made reference to data, and that's the data I've been put out, and to put it on record, that data is from the Excel spreadsheet that the Vice President put out. But then I want us to make specific reference to verifiable data that our viewers can also Google and look out for. For instance, the Controller and Accountants data. If you have a GRA data, you can share with me. If also there is data from, for instance, SNIT that you can share with me. And let's do a data-driven position or challenge of the Vice President's position on this matter. Why do you think that claim of 2.3 million jobs cannot be the case from where you sit?
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen and then I can show you. So like I mentioned, so the number that we've been told is 2.3 million jobs. So we're going to look at that and try to use these different sources to see if we can get something close to that. And from the way the messaging has been going around, they talk about public and private sector. So they specifically said they've excluded jobs created from planting for food and jobs because, obviously a lot of those jobs will be just in agriculture. And so they exclude them. But the sources that I'm going to use today, we have the Ghana Statistical Service data. We have data from the Controller and Accountant General Department. And when this conversation started and people were citing the Controller and Accountant General Department, people were saying that some, people, pro-government people were saying that the CAGD doesn't pay everybody. And so there are some public service jobs that are outside of that. And that is true. But I would also show that even when you take into account the ones that are outside of the core public service, it still doesn't add up to the numbers that we are being told. I'll also talk briefly about GRA data because, again, the expectation is that if people are getting jobs, and these jobs are, good jobs, at least good quality jobs, we should be seeing them paying taxes, right? That should be reflected in the revenue data as well. And then also SNIT, which we talked about. So briefly, two sources, because the Ghana Statistical Services uses surveys a lot for some of these stuff, right? And so in 2015, there was the labor force survey that was done. And in that survey, we found that the total number of employed people over that time frame was about 9.3 million people. Now, fast forward to 2022, we now have what is called the annual household income and employment survey. And that one in 2022, it showed that about 11 million, about 10.96 million people were employed. So, and the reason I'm using 2022 instead of 2023 is because the number that the Vice President has been saying, it's actually referring to 2022, from 2017 to 2022. So when you look at the breakdown that he gives, it's from 2017 to 2022. So that's why I'm using 2020 so we can compare. Now, between those two time periods, the total jobs is 1.6 million. Based on the Stat Services data. But remember that this is all jobs, right? This is important because the Ghanaian economy is largely informal, right? And so a lot of the jobs are in the informal sector. But this job growth that I'm showing you about those two time periods is 1.6 million. It's all jobs, regardless of the level of formality. But the vice president was specifically referring to public and private sector, which will largely be formal jobs. The other thing that I wanted to show is that, the whole idea of the public and the private sector. So if you look at this screen, this is data from the Ghana Stats Service. And what they do is they break down the jobs, right, number of employment by sector, right, by the specific sector. So you can see public into bracket government, semi-public institutions, private formal. And I want to really focus on just the first three columns, because the other part is like private informal. That is a lot of informal job. That's not what the vice president was talking about. People in agriculture and all of that would be in the private informal. But when you look at the public sector, over the 4 quarters in 2022, the average is about 690,000 jobs, right? And then when you look at the private formal, it's also around 940,000. Now, don't get confused, because this is the total. This is as of, right? So it's not like this is just the jobs for 2022. This is anybody, people. I come to you, I ask you, are you employed? It doesn't matter what time what time period you were employed, right? So this could be people that were working before this government came to power. This could be people that were working before 2017. And this could be people that are also in that period. But this is total. So even just looking at that, the number of people that are working in the public service is about 700,000. That is nowhere close to the 1.4 million that is being bundled around. Because even if we assume that everybody that's working right now is a job that was created by the current government, that would not add up. And then the same thing, the private sector number, they say it's about 900,000, and here the average is at 900,000. But again, remember that this is based on people that are working regardless of when they started working. So this doesn't add up to that number. So that is one source that I wanted to show. Then the other part is the Controller and Accountant General Department, because remember, they talk about public sector, right? So the public service, the way how it works is there are people that are paid by the controller, but there are also some organizations like the Ghana Armed Forces, the Ghana Police Service. They get a subvention from government to do their own payroll. So the government doesn't manage the controller doesn't manage their payroll for them, but the controller will transfer money to them. And my suspicion is that it has something to probably do with like security and all of that. So the army and the police service, they manage their own payroll. So that is when you look at this table, that is what the subvention is. But really, when even between the two, it's about 890,000 as of 2022, right? As of December 2022. And you would see that the mechanized, or the people that have, the government, it's about 700,000, which would be very similar to what we're seeing from the Stat Service also as of 2022. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is that even the subvention, the number is big because it also includes national service people, right? And technically, national service is not really employment. If you want to look at the full, like the definition of that, it's not really considered employment, really. And so that is so you will see that between the controller and the Ghana Stat Service, these numbers are far off. Like even the controller payroll, when we include the subvention, it's about 890,000. That is way, way less than the 1.4 million that the government is talking about. And even if this is also assuming that everybody that is to the controller payroll right now was employed by the current government, which doesn't add up, because you know that people were working way before the government came to power. So when I made this point, when others made this point, the ruling party people said, well, controller doesn't pay everybody. There are also other ones. So I was like, okay, well, SIGA, the State Interest and Government Authority, they also do publish this state of public enterprise. Like they basically have these reports that they do, right? And so when you look at this chart, you see on the top, on the bottom left corner, there's the number of employees by specified entities. So looking at state-owned enterprises, ECG, Cocoa Board, all those state enterprises, right? Even this one even includes what is called the joint venture companies, like things like Airtel, Tigo, Telecel. Those are all like, it's a partnership between the government of Ghana and some private people, right? And so of all of that, their total staff strength is 68,000. Right? So that will not explain the gap in the public service. So we keep asking the question, what numbers is the government relying on? Because these numbers from government's own data, looking at trying to cover all the bases, doesn't add up. First, we can't even match the 1.4 million from public service. Before then we can say, okay, what about the ones that were working before the current government came to power? So we cannot really explain that. tax data is the same thing. So because if people are working, you should see that they'll be paying taxes. So one of the exercises that I quickly did was I took the government's data from 2019 and then 2022 because I didn't have the tax data prior to 2017 and I didn't have the tax data for 2017 and 2018. So what I did was, let's look at the difference between 2019 and 2022. Mm-hmm. How many additional taxpayers have been added to the system, right? Mm-hmm. So when I did that, what I was saying was that about 40% of people that are supposed to have been part of this jobs created by the government are not showing up on the tax system.
And so, that's a very instructive point that you make, Alfred, there, because then if number of jobs have been created and we're not seeing that reflected on GRA, does that mean they are not paying taxes? Or the GRA's drive to get people pay taxes is also one that could be made, reference could be made to that as well. But then I see that there's some inconsistency in the data, and I pointed that earlier. 5.3 million by the Minister for Labor and Employment, and then the Vice President 2.3 million. If we have to go by the Vice President's 2.3 million, just for the sake of this conversation, this was first made in 2022, as you have just stated as well. So between then and now, is that to say that over the last almost 3 years, no jobs have been created?
Yeah, no, that's a very good observation that you're making there, because the 2.3 hasn't changed. It's always 2.3 million, right? Because so the Vice President said 2.1, and then when he provided the data actually showed it was 2.3. And so, yeah, good point. As for 2022, so 2023, no job has been created, basically. And then 2024 to date, to August, there hasn't been any jobs created. So that should put into perspective, how these numbers are coming about, and we don't have any way of verifying it because, again, it's just an Excel spreadsheet that the Vice President said. So what we can do is that we can look at all these other sources, right? All these other sources that should give us an idea of how the labor market is looking, and then we can compare and say that, because you see, when I did the CAGD and the Ghana Star Service, they were close. They were close to each other, but when you look at the rest, it's like no. It doesn't add up. That doesn't add up at all. So where are the jobs? And that's the question I keep asking. Where are the jobs that have supposedly been created by the current government?
Where are the jobs? And I'm sure that's a fundamental question on the minds of many people, because it was evident beyond reasonable doubt. I don't think there'll be any question of doubt per se. And to the extent that, Alfred, you keep consistently making the point that this is coming from the Vice President's spreadsheet and not, for instance, the Ghana Fiscal Service, who will give us the number of jobs created or the rate of unemployment as well, as we have seen. Alfred, appreciate your time. And trust that, look, we're going to have a bigger platform to have an extensive conversation on this matter here on TV3. So, Alfred, I appreciate you for this work. Thank you so much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Alfred Appiah is a data scientist and policy analyst joining us here on Ghana Tonight. And this is a matter that we're going to continue having conversations on in our various platforms. But coming up next here on Ghana Tonight, what are the fine details of the contract between the Ministry of Youth and Sports and the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation in respect of the All Africa Games? That's the question we're asking tonight, because the games have been over for the number of months, in fact, 3 months ago, and the matters never end. We're just getting to know this. This controversy of some $3.6 million was supposed to have been paid to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation under a contract for the state broadcaster to be the official broadcaster for the All Africa Games. Now, we shall come to the details of the contract later, but it is emerging during this Public Accounts Committee sittings that GBC received only $105,000 of the said over $3 million paid, raising questions where the rest of the money went or who is taking the rest of the money. Let's hear the sports minister when he appeared before the Public Accounts Committee yesterday. Take a look.
To cover the All Africa Games, right? Can you share with this committee how much that coverage was for and whether payment has been made for same?
Thank you so much. Yes, GBC was the official broadcaster for the African Games, the 13th African Games, and I can confirm that full payment have made to GBC.
Do you have perchance what the amount was?
I can't recall the exact amount, but I know that it's in the excess of $3 million US dollars.
You paid GBC
yes.
in excess of $3 million US dollars for coverage of the All Africa Games.
Yes.
Chairman, I think that I would rest here, and maybe the next time GBC appears before us, because most of the technicians who worked on the All Africa Games have still not been paid. And so we wanted to ascertain if you have paid and how much has been paid. Chairman, I'm grateful.
Yeah, $3.6 million. That's according to the sports minister, has been paid to GBC. Well, the Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation heard this. He said he had been receiving so many calls from even the employees of GBC who said, we received this amount of money. Well, he had cause to respond.
Well, I think yesterday I was one of those who were shocked to learn that the Minister of Youth and Sports said that they have paid GBC in excess of $3 million US dollars. And I want to assure every Ghanaian and the public that GBC's total benefit from the African Games was $105,000 US dollars equivalent. Nothing more was paid as a benefit to GBC. And that payment of $105,000 US dollars was as support for the fact that we dedicated an entire channel, 24 hours. We suspended normal programming for the GTV Sports Plus, and we dedicated it to the African Games. And for our role as the official broadcaster. That is what the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation was paid, and not in excess of $3 million US dollars.
And I don't know video would see no one Casaway was sitting in Moon Aquacoto about December 7th ebe. Your bumpires will say, and conquer violence be a cocomutina da quacoche with 2 near a crowd. Nanano first time was on subscribe Eddie and my like in a shave video more no. Aha, a year for Kent TV so.
Sir, the two and now share in Kunya Papa. See her, the beer set. Men how home. Share video na say. Me and J whom the number over. Fa na contact ye. Na ye more direction no. Meaning say at the Papa beer the bomb the way we are for Kent TV beer no. Ye kase. A yen no kure yakushi mo hununti and a ye bomb the rule. Enti Namia dom ye ma men so no o support to Kennedy compare ko Japan or you business woman enti mo nyina ye support the business women o support to Kennedy Japan na o business no enkoso enti we de ni die kwan so men sada men sayem se o pen konwa set ato agu fee ana se wadwumam e E&J home decor we dey fa number na free the more direction, but your own person of the Bahampa, Yanka said, we will come now. You'll be a bro. When him said, we are for Ken the Ghana for no babua, ama, your mammy business no, akoso. For any enquiries, with your phone number no. Yeah, we are for Ken, you say, a dear your bohun de Rubiano, and your papa assemble. Come and hold us responsible. So once you say same if you Royal Gallery wo opekuma and into Jemame number no in Dinkita with them 0537 314546 0537 314546 na man na me de atuja amount from ma me no ni ndikita wode so person ye say wo ba no mfa ye na ye fro ana say ye say wo ba no mfa ye bibibia e fa na nanom ne ehema asem ho and dem e kan for Royal Gallery e de amount say from no ni omu ndikita wode o mbe say wo ba no so de ye bibi e wo school ana say mpo wo to e de amuna wo nua e wa amunane ana say wankasa wo to na wa ton baby biala wo biala free delivery baby bia wo won sebeka so wo Ghana ha so wo amunane baby bia wo bia wo fra maami a woni bedin kita wode na wo so be siesie na wo ba no na wo aye fe ye papa
The foundation of every kid's education is important to every parent. That is why Leap International School is here to give your kids a solid foundation. The school that cares about its environment and seeks to transform it is one that cares about the education and well-being of its kids. The school has a playing ground, a bus to convey the kids in and out of school, as well as a well-furnished facilities and resources to groom the kids to future leaders. Not forgetting the well-learned tutors that are patient with the kids to ensure understanding is easy. They are located at Amanfrom off the Pokwasi Amasaman Road. For more information, call 0246 928 031 or 0246 098 067. Be part of a school that leads, learns, evolves, acts, and develops through sound education. Leap International School, the next leaders.
School now batan biara de ne baruko hono ninyo. Oye Rainbow Montessori International School. Rainbow Montessori International School. What you from Kratchi? Ikosi JHS. The Rainbow Montessori International School from ana. What been wrong? What's that what the Montessori curriculum? In a syllabus. No what the trauma na de. Na teachers wo hona. When you know why degree holders what the abutana badoyan what the trauma from ana dio. Na Rainbow Montessori International School. Wakitaba funyo man what the trauma from ana de. It's your mama from ana not doing boy wrong. Wakita ultra modern science laboratory, computer laboratory, library and research center, art and sculpture laboratory, hygienic canteen, now for a clinic. Na moye nyika 1 point there. Rainbow Montessori International School. Oye boarding house. Inyo. Into onfahu baby awo biara. Wawo from ane batuma ba school. Onfahu de watakwa. Takrade. Elibo, Cape Coast, Accra, Kumasi. One boarding house facilities na. Oye modern standard. Na wawashefu papa. It's your house master and house mistress. What you want to a boarding house no? It's your Nisro biara. Bambo another security no see assure. It if wabo from Anebra. The Ebehu Rainbow Montessori International School. It was Takwa in Soyem, opposite police station. It is said Ubaba Rainbow Montessori International School. To what do you nada? Was an Wabat Shana the Papa. Emana Zamsina. What channel 111. It's a quad mission form. It was Hantaman Rabank. What Takwa Soyem branch. Frayane 0277 100 823. Rainbow Montessori International School. In Moframa one that in a one fapim. Oshasuaha. It's a Hana Bartan Biara. Or the number from Mariba.